The boot sat in an evidence box for 36 years. It had been handled by investigators from at least 3 separate agencies. Transported, cataloged, reviewed. It had passed through the hands of forensic technicians during 2 separate case reviews, been stored in a climate-controlled facility, labeled correctly, filed properly, and returned to the shelf every single time. And every single time, the answer went back with it. That is the part that stays with you. Not the crime. Not even the arrest. The boot. Because this was never a case without evidence. This was a case where the evidence was present from the first hour, and the system looked directly at it, more than once, and did not see what was there. Before we go any further, drop your location in the comments right now. I want to know where you are watching this from. And tell me, have you ever heard of this case before today? Because most people haven't. And that is exactly the problem. On August 23, 1972, at approximately 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 20-year-old Jody Loomis left her home in Snohomish County, Washington. She borrowed her younger sister's boots. She got on her bicycle and headed toward a horse stable 6 miles away. She had made this ride before. She had somewhere to be, and she was going there. That was the last time her life felt ordinary. What no one realized that evening was that the answer to what happened next had already been collected before the sun went down. It was sitting in those boots. At approximately 5:30 that same evening, a couple traveling a dirt road near what is now the intersection of Bothell Everett Highway and 164th Street in Mill Creek found something they were not prepared for. Jody Loomis was alive when they reached her. Barely. She had been assaulted, shot once in the head. She was lying partially disrobed in the brush off the side of the road. Her bicycle was nearby. There were no other vehicles, no other people, nothing to indicate anyone had been there at all, except Jody and the evidence left on her body and her clothing. The couple did not wait for an ambulance. They lifted her into their vehicle and drove. Every second on that road was a second she did not have. She died shortly after reaching the hospital. The gap between the last place anyone saw her alive and where she was found was measured in minutes. Whatever happened on that road happened fast, in a window so tight that the couple who found her had likely passed the man responsible somewhere along the way without knowing it. Investigators arrived that evening. Clothing was collected. Biological evidence was logged. Photographs were taken. Everything gathered was stored, labeled, and retained by the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. The investigators who worked that scene believed they had what they needed. They were right. They just didn't know yet what they were holding. In the days and weeks that followed, investigators worked the case the way a 1972 investigation was worked, door to door, interview by interview, waiting for someone to say something that broke it open. No one did. No physical evidence could be directly connected to any named individual. No fingerprints. No witnesses who had seen anything actionable. The individuals questioned could not be eliminated with certainty, but neither could they be placed at the scene. By the end of 1972, the active investigation had stalled. What investigators did not know, what would not be known for 4 more decades, was that a man with a prior arrest for indecent exposure against a young girl in 1968 had never once come to their attention. His name did not appear in the file. He had not been interviewed. He had not been flagged. He had been living within a few miles of where Jody was killed, and the investigation had moved around him without ever touching him. The file was archived. The evidence was shelved. Systems do not always fail loudly. Sometimes they simply stop, and the silence that follows sounds exactly like the case has been handled. The man responsible went home that night in August 1972 and kept going home, in the same county, for the next 47 years. Jody Loomis's younger sister grew up after that afternoon. She grew up knowing she had lent Jody her boots that day, not because she had any reason to keep thinking about it, but because that is the kind of detail that does not leave you. It was not evidence to her. It was just the last ordinary thing she had done for her sister before her sister did not come back. The first year, the family searched. They called. They waited for the phone to ring with something other than condolences. In the second year, the calls from investigators slowed. By year 5, the world had largely moved on. Inside the family home, it had not. Birthdays changed in texture. Holidays carried a weight they had not carried before. The empty space at the table stopped feeling temporary. Her parents never stopped waiting. They never called it hope, exactly. But they never released it either. They would not live to hear the answer. Jody's sister built a life. She was functional in all the ways visible from the outside. But she carried something that did not have a name. The weight of a loss that had never been explained, where grief cannot complete itself because the story has no ending. The last thing she ever gave her sister was a pair of boots. That pair of boots was sitting in an evidence box at the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. In 2005, more than 30 years after Jody was killed, a detective opened the file again. And this time, someone looked at the boot more carefully than anyone had before. The technician who found it was not looking for anything extraordinary. In 2008, a state crime lab technician was assigned to re-examine evidence from the Loomis case as part of a cold case review. The box had been in storage for 36 years. The boots were inside it, still labeled, still sealed. The technician examined the exterior of one boot and identified a biological stain. Semen, present since the night Jody was killed. It had traveled through every review, every transfer, every agency handoff across 36 years, and no one had identified it until that afternoon. A DNA profile was extracted and uploaded into CODIS, the National DNA Database. No match came back. The profile sat in the system for 10 years, running silently, returning nothing. If this case has you locked in, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Because what came next is the part that finally broke it open. In 2018, investigators submitted the sample to Parabon Nanolabs for genetic genealogy analysis. Instead of searching for the suspect directly, the process searched for his relatives, partial matches on public ancestry databases, distant family connections that could be mapped into a tree and traced to a single point. An Oregon genealogist named Deb Stone built that tree. The branches converged on one name. That name had never appeared in the Jody Loomis case file. Not in 1972. Not during any review that followed. The man it belonged to had lived within 5 miles of the crime scene since the year Jody was killed, and in 46 years of investigation, no one had ever written his name down in connection with her death. Investigators now had a name. What they needed next was confirmation. Terrence Miller went to a casino in 2019. When he was done with his drink, he set the cup down and walked away. Investigators collected it. DNA extracted from the rim was compared against the 1972 profile from Jody's boot. The match probability, 1 in 980 million. Miller was 77 years old. He lived in Edmonds, Washington, 5 miles from where Jody was found. He had lived there continuously for 47 years. He had not run. Neighbors knew his face. He was arrested and charged with first-degree premeditated murder. Bond was set at $1 million. He posted it, went home under electronic monitoring, and was ordered to surrender all weapons. The trial ran 2 weeks in late October 2020. The defense argued the DNA sample was degraded and contaminated. The prosecution presented the chain of custody, the testing process, and a match probability that left one direction to go. The jury began deliberating on a Friday. On Monday morning, November 9, 2020, Snohomish County deputies responded to a death at a residence in Edmonds. Terrence Miller had died by suicide. The jury was still deliberating. The defense moved to dismiss. The judge denied it. The jury returned their verdict, reached before they learned Miller was dead. Guilty. First-degree murder. Detective Jim Scharf, who had spent years on the case, said he was glad the jury got to hear the verdict. He said nothing else about Miller. Jody's parents were gone. They did not hear a word of it. Her sister was in the courtroom. She had carried the weight of that August afternoon for 48 years. Now she sat and heard 12 people say guilty, and she did not celebrate. She sat with it. She let it land. That is what justice looks like when it takes 48 years. Not relief. Something quieter. Something without a clean name. The evidence was never missing. It was on that boot from the first night. One technician, on one afternoon in 2008, looked at something that had been looked at before and saw it differently. That decision broke the case. Everything that followed was built on that single moment of attention. Jody Loomis was 20 years old. She loved horses. She borrowed her sister's boots and rode her bicycle toward a stable she expected to reach. She had a fiancé. She had plans. She did not come home. The truth was never hidden. It was just unseen. And the difference between silence and justice was one person deciding to look one more time. If this case stayed with you, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Every story here belongs to someone who deserved to be remembered. Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if this video moved you, share it. The only thing that keeps cases like Jody's alive is people who refuse to stop paying attention.